All right, so today we're going to talk about historical fiction. This is our Unit 3 activity, and it's going to be a lot of fun, actually. Oh, thanks, Matthew, for typing in the chat. But yes, historical fiction. This is going to be a lot of fun, and we're off. So first of all, what is historical fiction? Historical fiction is any sort of fiction that is set in the past from when it is made. So this could be books, but it can also be video games, televisions, or movies. All of this is historical fiction. Here we have two examples of historical fiction. The Abraham Lincoln movie with Daniel Day-Lewis and the Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. So both of these are historical fiction, technically speaking. But as you can see, there's quite a lot of difference between the two. This one right here, the Daniel Day-Lewis movie, tries to represent things as accurately as possible. It does a lot of research. It tries to show people how they actually were. This one uses reality as a starting point, unless you believe in vampires, that is. But this one takes far more liberties, but they're both historical fiction. Now, here's something important to realize. Both of these movies had to invent things, right? Even this movie had to invent things, because although we can research a lot about Abraham Lincoln, we can't figure out everything that he thought about, how he felt, his discussions, his dialogues. The historical record just doesn't have that available. As such, the authors had to make up things, had to make up, change or alter things to make it a better story. So think of historical fiction as a sliding scale. On the one hand, you have people trying to represent it as accurately as possible. On the other hand, people just having as much fun as possible. Both are completely valid. We're probably going to try to go a little more accurate for this project, but then again, if you're inspired and you want to do something really fun, you can do that. But we first need to do the research. Oh, by the way, one important distinction with historical fiction, what makes it historical fiction is that it's set in the past from when it was made. So if you're just talking about a book about how to say, so right now, if I write a novel about the Civil War, it's going to be historical fiction because the Civil War to me is in the past. However, if there was somebody living through the Civil War who wrote about the events of the Civil War and a novel set there, it wouldn't be historical fiction because to them it wasn't history. So it's a little subtle distinction that we should keep in mind is that what's history changes over time. And sometimes you have authors who are in the past from 300 years ago, but the books that they're writing about are from 500 years ago of that. So that's something we have some time. Anyway, so how are we going to start this historical fiction project? Well, first, you need to figure out what era you want to write about. So if you have a particular country or a particular era that you're really fascinated about, great. Here are a few examples. The Roman period, the Victorian period, the Japanese period known as the Sengoku period, the Warring States period. All three great ideas, and there's thousands more. If you don't know what historical period you'd like to start working with, what I recommend is choose a country that you're interested in, that you like the culture. It could be our country, it could be another country, and then just look up the history on Wikipedia. See what the different eras are, and then see which one appeals to you more. So maybe you don't know much about Japanese history, but maybe you like, Japanese culture. Perfect. Look up Japanese history, figure out which period is most interesting to you. After you found the historical era, once again, Wikipedia is a great resource for this to get a general idea. Then you want to decide on what historical figure you'd like to write about. So bring up the historical figure bring up this historical period, look it up, see who were the big movers and shakers during this period, who were the men and women who changed history, and look over them and see which one interests you most. Then when you have an idea of that, then start researching. By the way, if you already know who you want to write about, that's fantastic. Go ahead, just go straight to there. But I would recommend that you do a little bit of research because it's kind of fun. It's kind of interesting to learn about periods that you didn't know about and you didn't know that you were interested in. So that's my recommendation. All right. So once you found your person, you want to conduct research. Now we're going to look for about 4 sources for this. My recommendation would be this: to have 1 or 2 sources about your historical era. So not only what was going on, but what did people wear? What did they eat? What did they do for fun? How did they think? Because very often people in the past thought very, very differently than we do today. Then you want to find 2 to 3 sources about your historical person. What did they do? What did they accomplish? And once again, we want to get the flavor of this person, the essence, what were they like? Were they a jerk? Were they nice? When were they a jerk? When were they nice? Were they brave? Were they cowardly? And what times? Any interesting facts? All great things that we can find. Great. Now, once you have your research, so that's about 4 sources, then you're going to answer some facts about your historical person. So, you're going to need the date and place of birth and death, if applicable. We probably will be, since these are people back in history. Then you're going to want major achievements. What did they do? Education. If they had a job, what kind of job? And then you want to write an overview of just about 5 to 7 sentences of what made this person significant to you. Now, if you find that you fill out all of these things, then that might be a great opportunity to do a little bit more research. Try about doing research. As long as you're finding new sources and you're recording what your sources are, that's perfectly cool. Just make sure we want to have at least this much information before we start off. So, by the way, some figures that you could write about. Right here we have Martin Luther King. He's a great character to write about. You can also write about, here's another example. This is Catherine the Great, if you're interested in women leaders. So, just 2 people that you could look into. And there's, of course, many, many more. All right. So, by the way, Matthew, do you have any idea of well, first of all, of what period you'd like to write about? What historical period would interest you? Any ideas? I myself am really interested in the Roman period, in the period just before the Russian Revolution is another one I find interesting. Ancient Egypt is a great one. Ancient Japan. What period are you interested in yourself, Matthew? Or just what country are you interested in? We could start there. Alternatively, if you already have a great historical figure, we could start there. What's your thoughts? Mhm. And you can send me your answer through the chat, or you could send the answer to Miss Lockman. Either way. So, and well, we could do an astronaut, but it would have to be in the past. So that's great. So if we did someone like Neil Neil Armstrong, yeah, I almost said Buzz Armstrong. I almost said Buzz Lightyear. Yeah, so Neil Armstrong would be a great person to write about. Great person. So that is the recent history, but that still works, and that's also a really cool thing because you get to talk about something that's hugely historically significant. Although an interesting thing is what'll be fun is where you decide where you want to talk, do the story as well. But yeah, astronaut is great as long as it's in the past. I would say probably a guideline about. Would you say about 40 years would be a good? Yeah, I think 40 years. Anything that's older than 40 years, you're going to be safe. If you have anything more recent than that, talk to a teacher and we can talk about it, right? But beyond 40 years, that'll be perfect. So yeah, 1960, first moon landing, 1969. Perfect, 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 perfect. Okay, now once you have your person, you've done your research. Now you're going to outline your story. So you're going to first decide on what is the most interesting part of your historical person's life to you. Very important thing. What's the most important thing to you? So it may be different from everybody, right? Two people might write about the same thing, but they might choose different periods where they found interesting. Perfect. Then you're going to arrange the events into an interesting order that's going to create drama and action. And we have this diagram right here, which gives a great example of how to write a compelling story. And it's really simple, but it's really, really effective. So, as you can see here, you have your protagonist, main character. This is going to be your historical figure. Now, your main character, your protagonist, wants something. You have to decide what they want. It could be a conscious thing that they want, like an object. It could be more of an emotional thing. Either way. So oftentimes it's both. Now your protagonist is going to make some action to get that object of desire, right? So, if we're writing a story about ourselves, we could want a sandwich, for instance. That's an object of desire. Why not? We take a first action, a first step to get that sandwich, right? We, open up the fridge. Fair enough. Okay. Well, if we get our sandwich right there, we don't really have a story. There has to be a gap between the expectations and the results. And this gap can be from inner conflict, personal conflict between people, or extrapersonal conflict. So, we could start it. I open up the fridge is empty, right? So I have to go out and I have to look for sandwich materials, right? So not a big action, but we can start off small. That's perfectly fine. Then you have a second action, right? You go to the store and you try to get groceries, right? Now, once again, we have to have another one of these gaps, or else there's not going to be much interest. So what could be a gap? Well, maybe when you're in the store gets robbed. That's a surprise, right? Okay, then a third action. Now the person has to figure out, okay, what do you want to do? Well, maybe the person in all the confusion, he can't pay the register. He wants to get out of there, so he grabs his sandwich material and he runs out of the store, right? That's the third action. But then, now we need another gap, right? And we keep on doing this because the more and more we have this, more interesting and the more ridiculous, the more fun it will be. So the next one, maybe he's running down the store trying to escape the robbers, right, with the sandwich materials, and then the cops see him and they think he's the thief. He stole the sandwich, right? So he starts running away from the cops. Oh no! So as we see, it keeps on going more and more and more until we have an ultimate object of ultimate decision. Does he get it? Does he not? Does he? And you have to decide for yourself. Now, for the advantage here is since you're writing a historical fiction, you already kind of know who your protagonist is and some of the things that they want, right? Your job is going to be finding these gaps between expectations of what they want and what actually happens. Now, what you can do is you can look at the historical record to find some of these gaps, and you can also invent your own gaps as well. You can create characters who maybe weren't there in history actually, or who could have been. You can throw in new plot elements, right? Whatever you want. But the idea is having these gaps in between the action to get the result and the result. All right. By the way, feel free, feel free to invent new things, minor characters. The one thing is we want to keep true to the spirit of the historical figures. So, if we go back here, let's see, so Abraham Lincoln, vampire hunter. Um, Obviously, Abraham Lincoln did not hunt vampires. But what this story did is it kept true to the basic concept of Lincoln wanting to free the slaves, right? So, because of that, it was a perfectly great historical fiction. Now, if you had Lincoln trying to enslave more people, that's opposite of his spirit, of what he was all about, and wouldn't really work so well. So we want to keep true to whatever the spirit of the character is. All right. Now we're going to get to writing our story. So writing can sometimes feel a little bit maybe confusing because there's all these different things you can do. There's a lot of advice. One simple thing though that I find really, really helpful is when you're writing to try as much as you can to show what's going on rather than tell what's going on. So what does that mean? It means that imagine that your story is like a movie and that you're just recording what you see, what you hear, what you smell too, although you probably don't smell things in a movie, hopefully not. But nonetheless, you're going just recording this and you're going to communicate the information as it emerges rather than telling people it. So here's an example. So let's say in your research you find that Abraham Lincoln was a very tall man, because he was. Well, you could either tell us that he was very tall at the very beginning, right? You could just tell it while you're describing him, and that would be okay. But what would be a lot better would be to describe how people, when talking to Lincoln, have to look up to him, right, in your dialogues. Or you could talk about how Lincoln, as he's walking into the room, has to stoop down low to get under the doorway. These are much more powerful, much more interesting examples because they're showing us, and it's trusting the reader, or in other mediums, watch, whatnot, that it's trusting them to figure out what's going on, and that figuring it out creates a lot more interest. So, yeah, you can do this with everyone. You can talk about Genghis Khan, right? Well, you could research and find, okay, maybe that he was smelly, or you can describe how people react to a smell. Although that's something you actually want to research. It wasn't smelly, you have to look it up. Probably was. But nonetheless, and finally, this is probably the most important part. Once you have all of the research done, you have the research done, you have the outlines done, you've internalized this idea of trying to show the stuff, um, relax and have fun. The best writing advice I've ever heard was it doesn't have to be good, it just has to exist. When we're writing our first draft, we just need to get it out there. Really, that's all. Because we can always make it better. We can always make it better. But first, we just need to have something that we can make it better, if that makes sense. So oftentimes, a quick rough draft to get your ideas out there, just start writing. Just start writing, just start describing, just start anywhere. You can always write it later and try to have fun. Because ultimately, that's what writing is about, having fun. All right. Now, if you have any more questions, you can go to the resource page. On this resource page, we have tons of great material. We have tons of great TEDx stories. We also have some stories about historical figures that you could write about, that you could use as your source, if you'd like. So a lot of great activities. You'll go down here, you'll click on the English 9 right here, English 9, 9B, 9B, you'll go to the third activity. I think it's the second one in there. You'll see it. Yeah, Unit 3. It says Unit 3. You have a lot of great resources. All right. Well, is there anything that I can help you guys out? Do you have any more questions? Matthew, do you have any more questions? Or are you all set? I am taking this a don't, and you forgot the T there, right? Aha, exactly. Perfect, perfect. Okay. All right. So, and you think that you're going to write about a astronaut? Perfect. Yeah, I think that'll be really cool. I think that'll offer a lot of great descriptions of like things as it's going up. My advice is to look into some of the different space missions and see which ones you find interesting. There's obviously the first mission to the moon. There's also the Apollo 13 where everything went wrong. There's also the Russian cosmonaut, right, and his experience. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. Just research, have fun, see what you like. All right. Well, if you have no more questions, have a fantastic day, everybody. I'll talk to you later. And remember, all your English teachers are here, happy to help. If you have any more questions, please call in. We'll work with you through this whole activity. Bye for now.